Hello everyone! Today I'm going to finish my Sleepy Hollow Speedway by showing you how to hook up the logic for this racetrack. But before I do, I want to let you know that this will be my last video for this year, except for my Christmas video in December. Right now, I'm not planning to do anything else, because the next 2 months are going to be very busy for me. But I should be back sometime early next year with a brand new toy box for you. But for today, we need to finish up this toy box. So let me start by putting down my power disc for the Headless Horseman's horse, which you see here. That puts down this pretty mean-looking horse. And if you don't have this power disc, I will show you the alternative that you can use when we get to that point in the logic. And now that we have that, let me walk you through the Creativitoys that you're going to need. And I've already placed these ahead of time to save a little bit of time, because this is going to be a little bit longer video today. Alright, we have a trigger area stretched across the starting line, like you see here. And then going around the course, we have another trigger area set up over here. This will be trigger area number 1, and it stretches across the road and beyond the fence a little bit in case the player crashes through that fence. And then we have a effects generator, which I'm going to hook up with a new locator connection to this locator that I've placed over here. A little further down the track, we come to trigger area number 2, which is stretched all the way across the track at the Y. And the exact placement of these doesn't really matter. If you get it in the general vicinity, you're good. And then we have another effects generator, which I'll connect to this locator. And you can see how this one is placed. And then we have trigger area number 3, which is right before the slope there, going up to the next level. At the bridge, we have trigger area number 4. Excuse me. I have a lot of phlegm in my throat. My asthma's acting up. All right. And then we have over here a path creator. And it's located about this point. You can kind of look at the ripples there in the road. I'll give you a good look at that. And the middle of the section there, about how far it is from the Y, where it comes back together. Notice that it's sitting above the road a little bit, one nudge, because this is where the pumpkin head is going to end up going. And I dropped it there, and I dragged the second point all the way over here. And I'll show you the properties for those in a minute. Right behind that, we have another locator, and about a terrain cube width behind that, we have another locator with an effects generator. And we're going to connect this effects generator up to that locator right next to it. Again, if you don't get the exact placement of these, that's all right, as long as you're really close. And then we have the let me pick this up. The Jack-o'-lantern collectible. Here we go. That's out of the Gameplay Toys drawer. That's what we're going to use for the pumpkin head. Continuing on around the track. Over here at the jump, we have trigger area number 5. And that's stretched across between the 2 trees on either side. And then we have a number of locators down here in the cemetery. And these are all connected up to another effect generator, which I did ahead of time to save a little bit of time. So the first one's in the middle of the road here. The next one is over here on the edge of that cemetery. There's one over here in this little corner. There's one over here by the corner of the hill. Another one over here. Another one here. and then another one over here. And all of those are connected up to this effects generator up here. And I connected those the same way I just connected all the other ones up. Trigger area number 6 stretches across the road here. We have a locator back over here. And then up here we have 2 logic gates and a replayer. And I have placed this saw blade pendulum out of the platforming toys. That's unlocked through Toy Box Speedway. If you don't have that, you can use the Rockhammer pendulum. Alright, and then back over behind town, behind these trees, we have a button, a level starter, a time delayer. We have a sound effect generator. That's from the Gameplay Toys drawer. We have the Sky Changer from the Instant Fun category. We have 2 counters, 2 vehicle summoners, and these are from the Gameplay Toys drawer. A logic gate. And we have a button over here between the church and this building. We're going to use that for our reset. So if the player wants to play this race multiple times, that will reset the toy box. And then we have the train over here, and I will cover these toys at the end because I know not many of you, some of you don't have the Marvel Battlegrounds playset, or you're on PC and can't get these toys. And since the train is optional, I'll save that for the very end. Alright, so the way the logic works for this toy box is everything starts by this trigger area here. When the player passes through this trigger area on lap 2 and on lap 3, things will happen. And on lap 3, as they go around the toy box, each successive trigger area will kick off an event on lap 3. Alright, so that's kind of the general flow. This trigger area here will always be on by default. The other trigger areas will be off at the start of the race. And so on our reset button here, you want to do a new logic connection when pressed. Come over to trigger area 1 and deactivate it. Make that same logic connection for trigger areas 2 through 6 around the track. Again, don't do the one for the trigger area at the starting line. This one is always active. Alright, so you're going to make 5 more connections here from the button to disable or deactivate the other trigger areas. Alright, on the trigger area here, again, we only want things to happen on laps 2 and 3. And so to keep track of that, we're going to use 2 counters over here. So the first counter will be for lap 2. And target count is already set to 2 by default. We just need to turn off visible display. For the other counter, this will be for lap 3. So we're going to set the target count on here to 3, turn off visible display. Alright. And so on our trigger area at the starting line, we'll do a new logic connection when entered, and we'll key this off by player 1. So player 1 crossing the starting line will be the thing. So if you have 2 players, only player 1 will drive the story forward. But we want to come over and increment both counters by 1. So that's the counter for lap 2. New logic connection when entered by player 1. We want to increment the counter for lap 3 as well. So increment both counters. And then the counters will drive what happens with the rest of the toy box. So if you want to play another race, the reset button will need to reset those counters. So in addition to deactivating the 6 trigger areas around the track, we also need to reset the 2 counters. New logic connection when pressed. Reset the other counter. Okay. All right, for the counter for lap 2, first thing we want to do is change the sky. So we're going to do a new logic connection when the target is reached and the count gets up to 2. Then we're going to come over to the sky, and under Disney Infinity, we're going to change it to the Disney Castle Twilight Sky. All right? And by the way, the counters start at 0. So on lap 1, as the race starts, player 1 passes through the trigger area. That increments the counters, and they're both raised up to count number 1. So when player 1 passes through there, after lap 1 is done, at the start of lap 2, that's when this is incremented and now becomes set to 2. So when target is reached, target being 2, that changes the sky. The other thing this counter will do is start the train, but again, I'm going to save that for the very end. All right, and that's everything for lap 2. Now on lap 3 is where things get interesting, because that's where most everything happens. So on lap 3, on the counter for lap 3, we're going to do a new logic connection. When the target is reached and lap 3 begins, first thing we'll do is come to our sky changer, and we're going to change the sky under Disney Infinity 3.0 to Syndrome's Sinister Takeover Sky. That is the best stormy sky that we have. If you do not have the Toy Box Takeover game, I don't know if that sky is available to you or not. If it's not, you'll have to look for a different sky that you can use as a stormy sky. And I have not looked through here to see what your other options would be. You'll have to kind of look through there yourself and pick a nice dark sky that looks a little darker than the Disney Twilight Sky. I'm not sure what that would be. Okay, once you've changed the sky, the next thing we want to do, a new logic connection, when the target is reached on count number 3, we want to come over and activate the first trigger area over here, trigger area number 1. All right. And so each trigger area is going to activate the next successive area. That's what the idea is here. And a new logic connection on the counter. When the target is reached, we're going to come over to the sound effect generator, and under the nature category, we're going to play the thunder sound. That's going to let the player know that the storm is rolling in. And by the way, on the properties for this, make sure you turn off 3D sound at speaker or locator. The other thing we want to do at the start of this is put in the Headless Horseman over at the bridge, because that's going to take a moment for that horseman to generate. So we're going to use this vehicle summoner for that. So I'm going to connect that up with a new locator connection to the locator over here at the bridge, which is where we want to put the Headless Horseman, which is this locator right here. And we're doing that a little early because, again, that takes a moment to generate. And the first time you play this race, it'll take a little longer to generate than normal. And under the properties for this, you're going to leave all of the options set the way they are, because none of those are going to come into play. So on the counter for lap 3, new logic connection, when the target is reached, come over to the vehicle summoner, go down to, if you don't have the Headless Horseman, what you can use instead is under the mounts category, look for the black horse. Use that. But since I have it, I'm going to use the hexagonal power discs and use the Headless Horseman's horse. Okay? Alright, so that's everything that this counter needs to do. Alright. Everything else now is going to be triggered by the trigger areas around the course. So when the player gets to this one, we're going to play our lightning bolt. So on trigger area number 1, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered, and we'll do this for both players. So when entered by player any, we'll come over to our effects generator. We're going to play once out of the electric effects, the lightning strike. Okay? And that'll put the lightning strike at this locator. If you want, you can place some other locators around this area, connect them up to their own effect generators, so you could have several effect generators here connected to different locators, and use a randomizer to pick which one you want, so the lightning bolt will be in a different place each time. I'm not going to do that. Just for simplicity, I'm just using that one. Alright, and then the second thing this will do is a new logic connection when entered by player any. I want to play a sound effect to go along with that. So we come over to our sound effect generator. Under the nature category, we'll play the lightning sound. And then the last thing trigger area number 1 needs to do when entered by player any is activate trigger area number 2. Okay. Now trigger area number 2 is basically going to do the exact same thing. All right, so we're going to go new logic connection when entered by player any. We're going to do the lightning bolt at that locator. So play once under electric effects, the lightning strike. And you can make the same connection from here to the sound effect generator to play the lightning sound as well. I won't show that here because you've already seen me do that. And then when entered by player any, the third connection the trigger area here needs to do is activate the next one. Alright, trigger area number 3, the only thing this is going to do is play a sound effect. So under here, a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll come over to our sound effect generator. And we'll play the thunder sound again. So go down to nature, select thunder. Alright, so those first 3 trigger areas are pretty straightforward. Trigger area number 3 also needs to activate trigger area number 4. So we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll have that activate the next trigger area. And in case you're wondering why I'm having the trigger areas activate each other in sequence, is because if you have 2 players and one player is lagging far behind the other player, when player 1 crosses that finish line and begins lap 3, if you have another player that's way back over here, we don't want to just turn on all of the trigger areas, because then the other player on lap 2 is going to be setting off things that shouldn't go off until lap 3. So that's why each successive trigger area activates the next one. Alright, so trigger area 4 is where things get interesting. So on this one, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by player any. The first thing I want to do is come over to our effects generator over here. This would be effects generator number 3. And we're going to play a visual effect here because the horse is going to be there at that first locator on the right. The player's probably not going to see him because it's dark and the horse is black and he's not going to stand out. So we need to put something behind the horse so the player sees him. So on the effects generator, we're going to play once out of the fire category, the smoky flames. All right. That'll put that effect behind the horse and help him to stand out a little bit. And I'll also draw the player's attention to here. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is have the Headless Horseman fling his pumpkin head at the player. To do that, we're going to use this path. And you'll notice again the path is sitting above the ground. The pumpkin head, when we attach it, will be sitting above the path. So this will be sitting above the cars. And it needs to be at that height to make it look like it was thrown from a rider on the back of the horse. For the properties on the path, you want to set them the way you see here. So change the speed to 300, turn off auto start objects when connected. And on the pumpkin collectible, we'll do a new path connection. And we'll connect that to the path. That snaps the pumpkin head up here. Now, we do not want to see this pumpkin head until we're ready on lap 3. And so we're going to come over to our reset button over here. And do a new logic connection when pressed. We're going to hide that pumpkin head. And you might be thinking, since we're doing all this reset stuff on that button, what happens when the player enters the toy box for the first time? Well, I'm going to hook up that level starter a little bit later. But the button needs to hide that pumpkin head, so it'll be invisible on laps 1 and 2. All right. So on this trigger area, when the player enters that, we want to display that visual effect, call attention to the Headless Horseman. We're also going to play a sound effect, so we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We come over to our sound effect generator. And we're going to play a crazy laugh. So under the vocal category, crazy laugh. And then we want the Headless Horseman to throw his pumpkin head. And so on the trigger area here, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by, oops, not any, because I don't want the AI cars doing this. New logic connection when entered by player any. I did push that button with my thumb. Didn't accept it though. All right, we're going to come over to our pumpkin head and display the pumpkin head. So we'll do a reset on the pumpkin head, which will make it visible on that collectible. And then on the trigger area number 4, a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll come over to the path and we'll do a reset and play. And that will start the pumpkin head moving down the path toward the bridge as the player is coming through the bridge from the opposite direction. Now, if there are 2 players that are pretty close together and they pass through this trigger area, the pumpkin will start moving and then it'll jump back when the second player goes through the trigger area and start over again. Not really much I can do about that. But when the pumpkin reaches the end of the path, we want to reset it. So on this point, we'll do a new logic connection when the point is reached by the object on the path. We will hide the pumpkin. And then when the point is reached by the object on the path, at that point, we'll come over to the path creator and do a reset and stop. All right, so that takes care of the pumpkin head. So we have the Headless Horseman throwing his pumpkin head. It's pretty easy logic, but it took a little time for me to figure out the timing and spacing of those toys so that it looks right as the player comes through the bridge to see the pumpkin head coming at him. Next thing we want to do on trigger area number 4 is a new logic connection when entered by player any. We want to come over to trigger area number 5 and activate that one. The other thing that we need to do is start the fog in the cemetery. And we can't wait until we get to this point to do that, because by that time the player is here, they're looking down at the cemetery. There needs to be fog there. So back on trigger area number 4, we're going to kick the fog off over at the cemetery. This is about the earliest point we can do that, where it won't impact a second player who might be lagging far behind. So we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll come over to our effect generator over here for the cemetery. And we're going to play looped out of the smoke drawer, the large area smoke. Okay. And that is everything that trigger area number 4 needs to do. All right, trigger area number 5. When we get to the cemetery, there's a couple of things we need to do here. The fog will already be going, but I want to put the Headless Horseman in over here at this next point, because we need to give a little bit of time for him to generate. And so we're going to use the second vehicle summoner over here for that. So we'll do a new locator connection on that. We'll connect up to this locator in the middle of the road right here. The other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put the saw blade into the toy box over here, and we're going to place it behind this turn. So as the player comes through here, the Headless Horseman's going to laugh. They're either going to need to swerve around him or try to hit him, but their focus will be on him, and they're probably not going to be paying attention to the saw blade that's going to be hiding around the corner. And so before we hook up anything to trigger area number 5, let's connect up some of the things we need here. So I'm going to pick this up and put it back to get to that part of the drawer. We're going to use the replayer to put this down. So on the properties for that, we'll take the playback interval to 0. I'll come out of the editor, and we'll step on the replayer to get the menu in the lower right corner. On my Wii U, I press B to start recording. I have to step off to get back into the editor. And we're going to place the saw blade right down here about this point. And then we'll exit out of the editor, step back on the replayer, press B to stop recording, and A to clear. Alright, and at this point we are done with this saw blade. We can take that out of the toy box. Okay, so trigger area number 5. There's a number of things we want to do here. First thing I want to do is play a sound effect when they get to the cemetery. So on trigger area number 5, a new logic connection when entered by player Annie. We're going to come over to the sound generator. And under the vocal category, we're going to play the Ghost Boo. That's kind of an eerie wailing sound, which I like. Excuse me, sorry. Bumped my headset. All right, next thing we're going to do with this trigger area is we want to put the saw blade in to the toy box. Well, actually, let's do the Headless Horseman first. So when entered by player any, we'll put the Headless Horseman in over here around the turn. And I only want to do this one time, so we're going to route this signal through this logic gate here. And a new logic connection on output. Once again, we'll put the Headless Horseman in. And on this vehicle summoner, new logic connection, when generated, we'll turn around and close the logic gate. Okay? So that way, this will only happen one time. And so what that means then is that the reset button needs to reopen that. So when pressed, we need to make sure this is in the open state for the next race. And we also want to take those two horses out of the toy box after the race. So on the reset button, a new logic connection when pressed. We will remove all. And on the button, a new logic connection when pressed. Come over to the other one and remove all. All right. And then the next thing we want to do is put that saw blade in here. Now, replayers are easy to corrupt. If you play back a replayer that has already been played back, or if you try to clear a replayer that's already cleared, you can corrupt the replayer. So that's why we have these two logic gates here, to protect the replayer and protect that from happening. We're going to use this one for playback. We're going to use this one for clearing. So on the trigger area over here, trigger area number 5, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by player Annie. We are going to input into this first logic gate. This will be logic gate number 1. And on output from that gate, we'll do a playback on the replayer. And on the replayer, a new logic connection. When this is played back, we will close this logic gate. All right. So if a second player comes through that trigger area, then it'll attempt to input into this gate, but it'll be closed, so it will not play this back a second time. That's how we're going to protect that replayer. All right. So again, this is logic gate number 1 here. So that means that when we reset the toy box for the next race, this is going to need to reopen that logic gate. So a new logic connection when pressed. We're going to need to come over here and open logic gate number 1. Okay. Now, the question comes in, once we put that in, when do we take that out? When do we clear that replayer and take that saw blade out? Well, we'll do that after the race is done. So again, on our reset button, we're going to want to do that. And I'm going to pass it through this logic gate here. And the reason I'm doing that will become clear here in a moment. So on this, we're going to do a new logic connection when pressed. We're going to come over to this logic gate. We're going to call this logic gate number 3 on the diagrams. And we're going to attempt to input into this gate. And a new logic connection on output. We will clear the replayer. When the replayer is cleared, new logic connection on clear, we'll turn around and close this gate. And that way, if the player pushes the button over there a second time, for whatever reason, this gate will protect this from being cleared a second time. Okay? So that's kind of one of the purposes of this logic gate. Now, what that means is this is going to be in the closed state after the race. after we reset. I also want that logic gate closed initially when we enter the level. So on our level starter, a new logic connection on catalyze, we're going to have that come up and close this gate as well. So this will be closed by default. So if the player loads up the toy box and for whatever reason they feel the need to push that button before they start their first race, we want to protect that replayer in that case as well. And so that's why we're having the level starter connect up and close that. All right. So then the player plays through the race. When they're done, they come over and push the button. The question becomes is when do we open this gate? Because it's going to be closed when the player starts the toy box. And we only need to open this gate when this has been played back. If this has never been played back, if the player aborts the race partway through, then we never need to open this logic gate because we don't want to clear a replayer that has been cleared. So on the replayer, a new logic connection on playback, we will open up logic gate number 3. So when this becomes played, then it's able to be cleared. And when the player finishes the race, they push the button. That is able to then to input into this and clear the gate. And clear the replayer. And having cleared the replayer, that'll turn around and close it. Close the gate again. So hopefully that makes sense. That's how we're protecting that replayer from being cleared twice. Now the other thing I'd like to do, because a lot of the things that button is doing, the reset button's doing, the level starter also needs to do. We want it to deactivate all of those trigger areas. We want to make sure the jack-o'-lantern collectible is hidden initially. And so ideally, I'd kind of like this to do all those same things. We can make all those same logic connections, but we can save ourselves all those if we just connect this up to the button. The problem is this is connected up to this logic gate to close it. So I don't want to invoke the button immediately. I want to make sure this has a chance to actually close before we try to send a signal through it. And so that's why I have the time delayer over here. And so we're going to leave this set to the delay time of 1 second. And on the level starter, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. We will start the time delayer. And on the time delayer, a new logic connection. When that delay is completed, we'll come over to our reset button. There it is. And we'll have that push the button. So the button will get pushed with a logic connection, which will then do everything the reset button is doing. And just so we can test that if we need to, we can use this button to invoke our level starter, since we're already in the toy box. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm just saving a lot of connections on the level starter by making all of my initialization connections on the button over here to reset, and then just using the level starter to invoke that. And the time delayer is just protecting the replayer from the possibility of the button press getting here before the close happens. Alright, so that's everything with the replayer. And I know that was kind of a long-winded explanation, and I'm sorry for that, but hopefully you're able to follow that. Alright, so we've hooked up this to that trigger area, number 5. So it's playing back the replayer. It's invoking the vehicle summoner. We've already hooked that up. And that's coming through this logic gate here. The last thing we want to do on trigger area number 5 is turn on trigger area 6 right there. So a new logic connection when entered by player any. This will turn on trigger area number 6. And by the time the player gets here, the horse should be here, the saw blade should be there, and we're good to go. The only thing then that trigger area number 6 needs to do is to play a sound effect. So we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player, any. We'll play that crazy laugh again. So that's under vocal. Go down to crazy laugh. Okay. And that's everything there. And I'm just reviewing my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. If I did, it'll be on the logic diagrams. All right, so our reset button over here then has to do a couple more things. So this is already resetting the counters. It's already deactivating trigger areas 1 through 6. We did a remove all on both vehicle summoners. We're hiding the jack-o'-lantern collectible. This is opening logic gate number 1 over at the replayer for the playback, and it's opening logic gate number 2, which is over here, for the vehicle summoner. And it's inputting into logic gate number 3 to try to clear that replayer. The other thing we need to do when we're resetting to play the toy box race again is we want to come over to our sky changer and put the Monsters University sky back. So put it back to daylight. And the other thing we're going to want to do is stop the fog effects in the cemetery. So we come over to this effects generator and we stop looping effects. All right, and that is it for the race, except for the train. And I can cover the train, I think, fairly quickly here. And again, this part is optional. So if you don't have the Marvel Battlegrounds playset, or you're on PC, I already showed you in the build video a couple episodes back what you can do as an alternative. All right, so under here, we have our path. And I can't remember if I showed you, I don't think I showed you this yet. The path starts here at the end of the railroad track. And so I drop that there, and the second path point comes all the way down here to the middle of this tunnel piece. Okay? And then I dropped all of these cars. These are decorations out of the decorations drawer. Again, these are all from the Marvel Battlegrounds playset. And I kind of mixed them up, spun them around a little bit, just so because they look different on either side. So this blue one is spun around differently than that one down there. And I got all of these cars here like that. For the path properties, you're going to set it the way I have it here. So you're going to set the speed to 210. You can tweak this a little faster if you want. I would not set this any higher than 220. 215 works pretty well. 220 is borderline. If you're really fast from the time you cross the finish line for the start of lap 3 to here, you can still beat the train, but you can't make any mistakes. So 210 gives you a little bit of flexibility. And you want to turn off auto start objects when connected. And then we need to connect up our train cars. And to kind of make this easy, I'm going to use the little trick that I did in my Disneyland video for building the carousel. Is we're going to use one button to turn on a repeater and another one to turn it off. And on the repeater, we're going to do a new logic connection on repeat. We'll have that come over to our path creator and do a reset and stop. And for the repeater properties, I'm going to set this to 1 second. So every second it's going to do a reset and stop on the path. And that will snap these cars into place as we attach them. I got to get through them first. There we go. Where's that button? Oh, I was on the right side. I just had to spin the camera around. Alright, so you push the button. 1 second. Every second that repeater goes off now, as you can see. And it's doing a reset on that path. So skip the first one here. Start with the second one. So we'll do a new path connection. Come over to our path. Connect that up. Select that car. Go into the properties. Toy box path. Everything in here stays the same except the reset point percentage. Change this to 4. Okay? And what you'll see is that car has moved now up to its reset position. You'll do the same thing with this one. Oops, not a logic connection, a new path connection. You'll connect that one up. Select the car, go into Properties, Toy Box Path. The reset point percentage on this one goes to 8. Okay, that one has now jumped up here. So this one will be set at 0. This one 4, this one 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, and 40. That's the reset points you're going to set on all of those. So connect all of these up to there, to that path. And then at the very end, you can connect this one up with a new path connection. Connect that to the path. I'll cancel out of that because I haven't put these other ones on yet. And you don't have to change any properties because that one's reset point should be 0 by default. When you're done, come over here and hit stop. And at that point, you'll have all of the cars on the track. All right? And then all you need to do is come over to the counter for lap 2 and do a new logic connection. When the target is reached, come over to the path for the train. And do a reset and play. Okay? And then on the counter for lap 3, do a new logic connection. When that target is reached and lap 3 begins, come over to the path and do a reset and stop. And you'll also want to have your reset button here. Do a reset and stop on that path too. Just in case the player happens to cancel the race partway through, you want to make sure this train is turned off. If I can select it. And that's it for the train. Train's pretty straightforward. And there you go. The Sleepy Hollow Speedway is done. And at this point, you can move all of the Creativitoys below the terrain or out of sight. And hopefully this was easy to follow, but if it wasn't, I do have those logic diagrams on my blog, and hopefully that will help you follow along with what I did here today. But I hope you've enjoyed this brief build. I'll be back sometime in December with my annual Christmas video. Until then, I want to thank you for watching. Before you go, leave a comment to let me know what you think of the logic for this course and what you might have done differently. And be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on my blog if you haven't already done that, so you don't miss my next video whenever that happens. That's all for me. Take care and have a safe and happy holiday season.